Morning. Today we're going to be talking to my friend, the newly promoted CEO of Inventure, Linus Dahg. We're going to talk about a topic that a lot of VC funds have not been thinking about nor implemented, which is succession planning. I hope you enjoy the show, and if you like the content, please hit the subscribe button below. Good evening.
Hello.
Linus,
Yeah.
good to talk to you. I haven't talked to you in many years. Actually, we caught up a little bit beforehand. I think it's right before COVID when I was actually in Stockholm.
Exactly.
And on my trip to Copenhagen, to Noma. So it's a long time ago. But I've known you for a while, and I'm really pleased to be able to talk to you.
Likewise. No, happy to have a chat and talk a bit more. It's going to be good.
Sounds
good fun.
So tell me, 10-15 second background about you personally.
Sure. So I've been in venture for about 11 years now, on the other side in a startup. I was a terrible head of growth at a startup, learned my ways around there. Swedish, I've lived in a few countries. I lived in Australia, Macau, so not too far away from your Hong Kong, the UK and Denmark. So that's the short professional side of things.
And then on the firm side of things, Inventure, what do you guys specialize in and what do you guys invest in? And what makes you different?
Sure. So we've been around the block, a few times. We're on our fourth fund now that we've done second close in. We're a Nordics and Baltics focused fund, so that's sort of the geo-scope of it. In terms of stages and in terms of focus areas, we're quite generalist in the sense that we look at almost anything except for, if it's purely hardware, biotech, medtech, etc. I think if you sort of scope in on a geo, you can't be too sort of focused on just a single domain because then the number of companies in that space won't be big enough. We only do seed, and then you can always argue what is seed these days, and especially now after a large correction. I can't give you an answer what seed is, but what I would say is the way that we define it is that we look at it from is a company mature and ready to take on a bigger round of money? So let's say sort of 10 million plus. If it is, then we're not the right investor. We're there to guide you from that, few people, could even be 20 people, but up to when you can actually take on a large round of capital, plus handle larger clients or customers as well. I think what sets us, sorry. Go.
Yeah, go ahead. What sets you guys apart?
Now, I think what sets us apart is probably two things. One is that we have a model that's a little bit different where we do about a third of the capital first time for first time tickets and then 2/3 for follow on. So we really like to back our companies over time. One of our best companies, we've been investors in four rounds. The other one is that we have a dedicated team of operational people that only work with our portfolio companies. So we believe that from an early stage, there's so many similarities of pitfalls you can avoid. So that's something we've doubled down on.
I want to kind of lean into obviously we kind of figure out what you're different in the Nordics and in Sweden. Also what I think sets you apart is there was a recent article in Sifted where you talked about really succession planning. And when I knew you in London and when I knew you in Sweden, in Stockholm, you were a partner. And now you are the CEO, right? You are kind of leading the firm. And look, I'll be honest. I don't think you expected to kind of be in this position to lead that. Yeah. How do you think about what have been the challenges of being in that position? And tell us kind of that conversation. How did you first end up kind of being in this position?
Yeah, I joined the firm about 6 years ago now, soon 6 years ago. Already back then, I joined as a principal, we called it investment director. When you and I met each other, I was an associate in London, so on the junior side of things. And already then, the guys had been very sort of thoughtful, the two main founders of Inventure, that they wanted it to sort of outlast them. So they said already from the back, before I joined, if you join, you're part of the succession, and what that can look like, no one knew back then, but it was very forward looking on their part. Then, fast forward a few years, I joined the partnership about a year and a half later, started taking on more sort of ownership of specific internal projects, everything from, how do we organize ourselves when it comes to this, let's say the operational elements that we have, and then later on, how do we become even better at sourcing, deal winning, all of those things. So one thing led to another reality. They came to me a few years ago and asked me hey, whenever we're thinking about the next stage, would you be keen to lead it? I was initially quite, reluctant to take it on because I sort of dreaded that it would take me a little bit too far away from what I think is one of the coolest things about the industry and the job, which is obviously to work with phenomenal entrepreneurs. But as I've sort of thought about it and grown and sort of obviously developed myself, I got more and more excited about taking this from a fund perspective, but rather try to build a firm perspective, and I think that got me excited at the end.
And how do you make that transition? Like how you were talking about, like you're working yourself and educating yourself. How do you make that? Like, yeah, first, like we get into the job because we want to work with the founders. Now you're in charge of setting the direction and setting the trajectory and setting a direction that you may not even know, right? Where's sure. tech headed, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Let's be honest, we're not sure. So
no.
Yeah, how do you do this? How do you make the transition, and then how do you lead?
It's a journey, right? I mean, I think that Sami and Timo, who sort of founded it from the get-go, they've done a phenomenal job, and I'm very grateful for them passing on the baton to me. At the same time, one has to realize that if we don't evolve, we die. So it's constantly sort of like very much like a Jeff Bezos quote, day one. We're very thankful for what we've done so far, but we also need to make sure that we keep on growing and keep on evolving, etc. Yeah, do we know where market's going to take us? Everything from inflation and disposable incomes crashing, etc. Russia, Ukraine, we have no idea. But I think what we can do, what I've tried to do so far, but it's, again, I'm new at this, so I've made a ton of mistakes already, obviously, is to set us up for success a little bit differently, like how we rethink some of the internal processes, how we rethink, our organizational structure, and try to, make us move faster and be more, create more learning loops and stuff like that.
Interesting. So I guess a lot of it is the culture. At least I think what you're saying is like that's the thing that you can control. You don't know what the future is going to be. You don't know what trend is going to come. But what you can control is kind of innovating the culture, innovating the people and the processes.
Yeah. You can innovate on a few things, I believe. I think you can be very sort of clear on what direction you want to go in terms of how you win deals and how you want to sell and what you actually want to bring to the table. So everything from sort of like a value creation point of view to, who should we be as human beings towards founders, towards entrepreneurs, towards companies, towards co-investors. So it's very much a lot about culture. It's a lot about staying humble, staying true to support people. It's a people business still. So yeah, culture is it.
So it's soft stuff and some of the processes as well. And then I'm going to kind of broaden into like the rest of Europe, like in the sense.
Sure.
How acute is the problem of secession, right? Like, are you the only ones kind of thinking about secession? And how acute of a problem is this across the industry?
We've had some thoughts about this, and we were part of this Sifted piece not so long ago in January. And what we've seen is that very few funds have sort of successfully done it. When I asked around, when we started chatting about it internally, and asked around with some funds that I know have undergone the change, that have already done it, no one wanted to say anything. So very much like a hush-hush situation. Then I started asking some more private equity guys, and they were more forthcoming and open with it because typically they made more money, first of all, so they have enough fuck-off capital. Second, it goes faster typically when you look at sort of, holding periods. So from that perspective, they were being able to be more candid on it. We're going to see one of the reasons why I thought the piece in Sifted was interesting, because this is going to happen a ton in Europe in the next few years. You'll see less of sort of partners within funds that will leave and set up new shops, for one. Secondly, you might have a couple of solo GPs that do a great job at it, but capital is just more expensive now. You can't jump ship because you're going to see a retraction of the industry, not an expansion of the industry, is our view. So I believe that that's why it's an interesting topic right now, because we're just in the early innings of it, and it's a sign of maturity, obviously, of the industry, that people are moving from building funds to building firms.
And then, as part of your research and as part of the article on Sifted, like, what have you noticed? Like, what makes a good succession plan? Like, what are there some certain key factors, one or two key factors that you think kind of makes the largest kind of impact?
Yeah. I think being very sort of transparent is one thing that obviously, like, if you look at sort of our main stakeholders, right? I mean, it's the companies that we work with and that we invest in. It's our employees, the people that work for the fund, and it's LPs. So I think being very transparent in that, you know, it be very sort of forward-looking in terms of talking to them about it has been something that's been important for us. That kind of level of transparency, making sure that they understand where we're coming from, and you know, that you start nurturing those relationships very early on, because it's a long-term kind of industry. I think that's been one. Yeah, no, that's probably the core one, to be honest.
And just to give a time frame, like, when did you even start talking to LPs? And because I can imagine if I'm on the LP side, if I'm on the GP side, I'm kind of hesitant to the LPs because I really don't know how they're going to react, right?
Sure.
They're the ones that are going to fund the next one. So, you know, there's a natural kind of inclination not to tell them or how to message and everything. Yeah. How did you guys think about it?
We went back and forth. In reality, you know, like you said, it's not an easy thing to address. We went about it the fact that we thought, you know, we started talking to them quite early, and especially a few selected ones that we have sort of a closer relationship, and they're typically part of our advisory board. And so the ones that we sort of spar with the most on strategy and direction and, you know, stuff like that. So they were sort of the key ones, both because they put in quite a bit of substantial capital into the fund, but also because they're closer to us. So we obviously, in that sense, you have stronger relationships within the LP base, and that's where you usually started off. We also feel that, you know, it might be if you ask them for feedback, it's usually where you say, where would you want to see this happening? Where would you want to see us evolve, etc. And typically succession is one of those things that a lot of seasoned LPs think about. How have you thought about it? Actually, funny story, we're thinking about it.
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you have no idea about, you know, we've just done second closing of our fund in November, and we're doing final close now in the spring. This is among the more experienced LPs, this is a huge topic for them. They think about it day and night. How is this going to move into, because fund cycles are so long, right? 10 years plus 2, and then you raise another one in sort of 4 to 5 years if you're somewhat traditional. And so they think about it all the time. Like, how do you make sure that it's not, if someone leaves, the fund goes bust?
Key man risk. So actually, to some degree, you're saying that they were happy that you addressed the issue, and maybe you were earlier, or maybe like I don't know, but yeah, at least you confront the issue and instead of the kind of sweeping it under the rug.
100%. I mean, I think no one, whether you're on an LP in a fund or whether you're an investor into a company, you don't want to be caught off guard. You want to know what's happening, even if you don't approve 100% or whatever it is, but you want to be involved, and you want to know what's the current thinking. So I would say that the sentiment has been very positive on that we've been more proactive than we actually would have needed to be.
You say, as an industry, to summarize that, as an industry, I think Europe is maturing in the sense that, yes, they're going to have these conversations in the next 1 to 3 years. LPs are constantly still, thinking about this, and I guess the article kind of helps. But on the other hand, they were always thinking about this. So kind of the general advice is perhaps to talk about this earlier rather than later.
Yeah, for sure. No, 100%. And it can be that you have sort of like an offline chat with them, right? Like, it doesn't have to be at a formal advisory board meeting. Just pick up the phone, go for lunch or whatever it might be, and just say, we're thinking about this. How do you think about a succession? How important is it to you? So you can also turn it around by just asking questions.
I'm going to ask this, how have some of the kind of frameworks as well, how have some of the firms that when you talk to private equity VC firms, how have they done it well, in the sense do they have programs where you try to incubate future partners, try to identify those kind of future kind of CEOs and managing partners very, very early on?
Some have. You can see that clearly in some of the bigger brands, VC brands, right? Some haven't thought about it much at all, so they're going to, so it's very quite ready and have open up the conversations quite early on. Others not at all. And then I think there's a huge separation that needs to be made on how you do it, because you can do it where you start thinking about it from a management company, not to get into too many technical details, but management company versus a specific fund and carry in that fund. If they're not aligned, then you're in for a treat over time, because then in essence the management company is where you can reap a lot of benefits and So it depends a bit on if you thought it through for real, or if you thought it through, yes, this looks good, but I'll still hold a ton of carry and someone else does the hard job, right?
Right. So so basically, if you're short term about it, at least some of the things, I'm not going to kind of call any names. You could be very specific and say carry per the fund, and that's kind of short term,
yes.
versus the carry as it is to the management company, because they've got carry for all the different funds.
Yes, exactly. And typically, if you don't handle both, then at some point you need to do a lot of changes in the management company. And that is where, there's a lot of money at stake if they've been successful. And that's usually when you start talking about succession. If you haven't been successful, there is no talk about succession because the fund company dies.
Interesting. Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. Like, even though funds are still long, I mean, they're still individualized, and versus the management company gets, that's the lion's share, right? Everybody wants that at the end of the day, and that's when you really know, like, they're serious, like, about succession planning.
Yeah, and that's just the financial side of things. Then you have everything in terms of taking the firm to the direction that you want, and then you need also, obviously, to make sure you have enough buy-in that you can control that direction shift. So.
And that's usually kind of a equity stake of the management company, or kind of a board seat?
Yeah. So it's you usually have, like, similar to any other company, you have a shareholders agreement that basically stipulates what kind of, if there's sort of bigger changes, what needs to happen there. So qualified majority, sort of the typical way to whenever there's voting. But that happens not in a fund. That happens in the management company.
Correct. Okay. So basically, all the action needs to happen in the management company to be serious. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. Look, we can go deep into this as well. Last question, because we could go on forever. If you could do this all over again, right? If you rebuild this all the way from the ground up again, how would you do it differently?
So first of all, I want to say that I'm happy that I don't have to build everything from the ground up. Different kind of fortitude to handle that. Two things. One is being from Finland, which we originally are from, has been sort of a blessing and a curse on the LP side. We have phenomenal LPs, and we're obviously delighted and thankful that they've backed us. Yeah, no, same here. Like, I feel like a half Finn, even though I have no relationship to them whatsoever. But it also means that they've been very sort of proactive on backing a few selected GPs, both on the private equity side, growth side, and on VC. And we've been fortunate to be one of them. But it also meant that we haven't been strong enough on the internationalization of our LP base. We've been very good at adding international people to the team, and investing sort of across all the Nordics and Baltics and a bit outside with a bit of Nordic Baltic twist. But we have been not good enough so far on the international LP base. So that's obviously a bit of work now to both now in final close and for next fund generations.
Fair enough. And they kind of lean into that a little bit. Is it because of a funding risk, or is it because of the fact that if you have a wider kind of LP base, the founders have larger reach, right, into those particular markets? I don't know. I'm just going to use an example. Like, let's say, for example, a Singaporean LP, right? They can kind of move into the Singaporean market a lot easier.
Yes. So I would say that it's predominantly so the portfolio has the best chances to explore whatever avenues they want to take. Obviously, it depends also what kind of LPs you have. So let's say you have, pension institutions, or if you have insurance companies, or if you have something else. So it depends a little bit on that, and that means different kind of flexibility and also different kind of appetite to help them on the ground. So I think that kind of mix is always good to optimize for over time. In some cases, some of our LPs have been direct investors, obviously, into the businesses, and they help them a ton. And I think that's the kind of thing we can see that can have sort of like an outsized impact for the fund.
So actually, it's
and the companies.
Alex Ohanian, I think, was tweeted out just like choosing LPs and making sure that those values are aligned to what you're building is super key. So to your point, like, even though you've got great LPs and long-term LPs, you also have a hard challenge in finding new LPs that are similarly aligned in terms of values.
Yeah, I think you know how it is. I mean, there's been thousands and thousands of new venture funds launched in the last few years. Like standing out from that and finding the right ones and building those relationships. You know, there's a lot of gatekeepers around. Like, I'm not worried that we'll find them. It just takes time. And I think that journey is something I wish we would have kicked off a little bit earlier. With the luxury of hindsight, that is, obviously.
Of course. Cool. Well, thank you for your time. And that's all the time we have. But thank you for sharing your insights.
Of course.
Cheers.
Happy to.
Thanks,
Thank
man.
you. Bye.